Okay, I have 6:30 as mayor of the Village of Cooperstown. I called this Board of Trustees meeting for May 26th to order. Joe is our flag bearer. He has a flag. So please join me in the Pledge to Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much, Joe. I appreciate that. Correspondence. I believe the only correspondence was from Alex Webster. Is that correct? And we all received a copy of that emailed to us, and it will be included with the minutes. Correct, Terry?
Yes.
It was actually from Janine and Alex.
Janine and Alex. And we'll review that actually again later. As you can see under new business, we're going to be talking about the potential for additional dining and vending during this summer. So we will make sure to have that in front of you and you can review it at that time as well. There were no other comments or correspondence. And we have no public hearings. So let's begin with the review of the minutes from April 27th, 2020. I know I sent one little question comment. Cindy, I know you did. So is there a motion to approve those minutes with the corrections submitted?
So moved.
By Jean and seconded by?
Second.
Cindy. I saw McGuire's hand go up, but he was muted. So one or the other. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
The only thing I would like to say about the minutes, because this did kind of get mentioned later and probably won't be covered tonight, but I want to make sure it's documented somewhere. In those minutes, we did establish the 25-cent credit card fee, if you recall, on at our parking meter kiosks. When push came to shove, when we were trying to get the equipment all open and up for Memorial Weekend, we realized it was going to be kind of an excessive figure. It was close to, Cindy, correct me, wasn't it close to about $800 to $1,000?
Yeah, it probably would have been about $1,000 to make that change to our software.
So we will certainly do that. Nothing has to be changed. We've incorporated it, but we don't need to institute it this year. It seemed unlikely to be recouping that credit card fee. So I just want to make a note of that. So since that was a bit of a update via email post our last meeting. So that will be reflected in this month's minutes that we opted not at that cost to do it this summer. We'll do it next year. Zoning officials report. Shane isn't here, right? No. Any sort of comments, questions? We were all emailed as well, the ZBA, the planning board, and the HPARB minutes for the month of May. The only thing I would like to note are two things in the planning board. One, you'll note that they're working on drafting a minor subdivision law. And so the planning board is going to be kind of putting that together with guidance from Jane, looking at other municipalities, and then it'll come to us for review and passage, potential passage. The other thing, and if you read the planning board minutes, you will note that the DOT, and I realize not all of us, I didn't get their recommendations for the SEPQ credit union on Glenn's parking lot changes, etc. I didn't get that as well initially, but DOT did recommend a sidewalk. And as you know, in our village, we have adopted a complete streets program. We've done, a transition program to try and make ourselves more accessible. So we think it seems like this village has already strongly endorsed sidewalks. And we are going to see what the sort of way forward on that might be. This might be the time to think about a sidewalk up there. So if any of you have read the planning board minutes, you'll know what I'm referencing. So the DOT had recommended it. We will see how they decide to move forward on it. Are there any thoughts about it? Are there any feelings on the board about a sidewalk?
I think it's important to note that the Streets Committee has, in the not too distant past, heard from residents of the village who had specific concerns about being able to walk to the Leatherstocking Credit Union, specifically because of the need to cross Glen. And that factored into our discussion about the intersection at Glen and Grove in terms of the stop signs, you may recall, last year at about this time. So I'm not sure, given the situation that we have right now in terms of meetings, that the planning board was aware that that conversation had taken place at the Streets Committee and Board of Trustees level in the past. And it's unfortunate that they didn't have that before they reviewed the DOT recommendations, so that they knew that there were concerns about a sidewalk.
So that being said, is there, oh, I'm sorry, Joe.
I just wanted to ask, in terms of the recommendation from DOT, whose expense would this be to install the sidewalk? It's part of the approval of the credit union's proposal. They would pay for it, or we would bargain about that, or we would do it as a village expense.
Just in historical, you should know that when CVS was going in on the corner of Beaver and Chestnut, they had to redo the whole sidewalk, which was on Beaver, and they also redid the one on Chestnut. So in that case, it certainly was the business meeting the needs of the pedestrian traffic in the village. I would say in this one, it would certainly be on the village to take it a new sidewalk from Grove to almost that property, because there isn't a good sidewalk in that area right now.
Right.
Cindy,
Yeah,
Okay.
there are about 200 feet between the Grove Street intersection and where the credit union's property starts. There are also a good number of trees in that area. So, we would have to think critically about how we do it. And I think there would be a part that would fall to the village.
Yeah, I'm assuming when there isn't a sidewalk to begin with and the village wants to install one, that's one thing. But in the CVS property, there was a need for them to reconfigure the whole lot and repair the sidewalks and make cuts and so forth. So is there a distinction with a difference between not having a sidewalk to begin with and who pays for it, and a redevelopment of a property that affects the sidewalk and that burden falling on the developer? I'm just in terms of our bargaining position is all. Really.
just historic, oh, I'm sorry, Jim?
I was just going to mention, I think in the CVS situation, I think they wanted and needed to tear up the sidewalk and lay down a new sidewalk for their own purposes. And it also fronted completely on their property. Again, in the credit union situation, the sidewalk that's needed is not on their property and looks like a village expense to me. If they want to contribute, that would be nice.
I was historically, some of you may remember that prior to CVS, when that was a motel, for years, there was no sidewalk on Chestnut Street because there were a shrubbery and a parking lot that belonged to the prior owner, the motel. And there was great agitation because there was no sidewalk at that end of town. It ended basically at Beaver Street. And so the village really established, the right of way. The shrubs came down and that sidewalk was established. So I think that, there is sort of I don't want to say precedent, but there is a recognition that we are very much a pedestrian-oriented community and value our sidewalks.
Ellen, if I might add.
Yeah, I'm sorry, McGuire, go ahead.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I think that, that coming down Glen, people fly through there. We've talked about this before. It's a pretty dangerous intersection. And as you said, we are a very pedestrian friendly village, and being consistent with that is a good idea. So I could definitely see the need for a sidewalk there. And if that's what the credit union is looking to pursue, I would think we would want to work with them.
Okay. All right. If there's any more comment or questions about that, is there a motion to accept the zoning officials report, which you have in your packet?
Motion to approve?
Moved by Jim, second by, I think, McGuire. All in favor?
I,
Aye.
All right. That, as you know, we're kind of in abbreviated meetings now on our committees. So that makes us jump right away, Joe, to the finance and personnel. And Deb is here. Is there anything, Deb, to add to the report, the treasurer's report?
well then,
No, there's not.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Joe.
what we have in our packets, as usual, is our wealth management statement, and there has been some decline in value, not surprisingly, because of the events associated with the virus, but that's in the ordinary course going to fluctuate, or in this extraordinary course. Richard, Ellen, and I completed the bank reconciliation review for March and April a week ago. Notice the sales tax report shows a 30%. We finally got the first time frame that involved the virus effects. And compared with March of 2019, we're down about 30% in revenue. So our share of the sales tax. So that's a real thing. That's we've anticipated that in our final budget, and across the board, there'll probably be those kinds of impacts, but I just wanted to call that to your attention. Item 5, we're skipping the Edmonds. Terry, did you want to explain anything of that to us, or just?
No, we're just going to pull that and have Kyle take a look at it, because we do have some cloud-based activities and we just don't want to overlap anything.
Okay, thank you. We've had a donation of $500 from Veronica Seaver, and we need to authorize acceptance of that, and I will move that we do that.
Moved by Joe, seconded by Jim. All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you.
May I ask a question about that one?
Sure.
Is that for the tree in front of her home? Or is it just a general donation?
I believe it's just a general donation.
Okay.
Items 6 and 7 on your agenda are the need to declare surplus the sewer plant generator and the backhoe. We've already replaced the backhoe, I think, with a price that we got several months ago that was too good to pass up, and so we didn't, and have made that purchase. So the backhoe we have can be made surplus. And with the sewer plant upgrade, we had a generator in place that is replaced, and our view is that we should see what we can get by declaring it surplus, and at least recoup some of the value of it. So I don't know if we have to do those as a group to make a declaration, or do we have to do them one at a time?
Doesn't matter.
If it doesn't matter, I will move that we declare the backhoe and the sewer plant generator a surplus.
Motion made
Second.
by Joe, second by Richard. All in favor? Thank you.
And the last item, item 8, we're making transfers regarding $70,000 for the elevator replacement and another $31,000 for skylight engineering back to building reserves. We're setting off those activities for until a future time.
There's just one change. The 31,550 is actually 30,985.12.
Okay, and with that adjustment, I would move that we make that transfer to building reserves.
Motion made by Joe, seconded
Second.
by McGuire. All in favor?
Aye.
Well, Joe, excuse me, while we're on transfers, there's a couple more that I think are important to do now, since this is our last board meeting of this fiscal year.
Sure.
And that is for parks, because we did have some funds this year for our Lakefront Park planning project, but we're going to have to pay that before we are reimbursed. So moving 7,230 from 7110-410, which is parks material and supplies, 7,600 from 7110-440 from parks contract professional and maintenance, and 5,270 from 7120-100 parks winter rec personnel, which we did not use this year. That will be $20,100 total to move to Parks Reserve for our Lakefront Park engineering project.
I will move that we do that. Is there, if there's a second, we can discuss it if anybody has.
Second by Jean. I'll let Jean do that as Parks. Any other comments or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And just one more, it sort of dawned on me that I don't think we fully, because we expected our police department ticketing equipment to be purchased in this fiscal year. With delays in the court operating, we've had a slight delay in purchasing a ticketing program. And so I would like to move that we move 20,000 from 3120-100, which is the police personal services line, to police equipment reserve. Is there a second? Second by Richard. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Sorry, Joe, go ahead.
No, so to be jumping down to, are there any other abstracts and transfers? I think we do have generally some to approve or not.
Well, first you have under personnel, the sick bank donations to approve for the fiscal year.
Okay, all right. I was going to do all the abstracts together. Let's stick with the agenda then. First, yes. Go ahead, Terry.
Okay, just you noted there are attachments regarding who is making donations to sick bank. So those just need to be approved as submitted.
Can we just take one moment for you to explain how the sick bank works for people who may be listening in?
Sure. Sick bank members, you have to have at least 5 sick days in order to join the sick bank, and you have to donate at least 8 hours a year in order to, continue to be a member of sick bank. The sick bank is available if there's some sort of chronic illness or injury, certainly You would have to exhaust all of your accumulated time, vacation, personal, sick, everything before sick bank would kick in. But if someone had to be out months per se, it would give you up to an additional 80 days of, paid time
Thank
from
you.
the sick bank. So, and there's always, quite a few hours, certainly more than we've ever needed to use, thankfully, banked.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
All right, so Joe, you had made the motion to approve the sick leave bank applications for fiscal year 2020 to 21.
Yes, I will make sure that I did make the motion. I wasn't sure I had, but yes, I do make that
I
motion.
think it was, all right, and second by
Second.
Mac, all in favor?
Aye.
And now I think we're abstracts and transfers, aren't we?
So I don't know if there's anything unusual to be called out on them, but I would move that we approve them as we do typically.
Motion made by Joe, second by Mac. I'm sorry. Were there any questions on any of them while Deb's still here? Yep. All right. Motion made, seconded, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right. Deb, I know you have a drive home because you're at work. So if there's no other questions for our treasurer, I think we'll excuse her from our Zoom meeting so she can head home.
Thank you.
Thank you, Deb.
Thank you, Deb.
And Terry, that brings us to your report as administrator.
Okay, wastewater treatment, you've seen, there's really nothing to report on beyond what the agenda is right now. TEP, I emailed earlier today, pay application number 10, that was submitted to us for payment. So we'll need a motion to add that and be able to pay it.
And we're talking about the TEP. That was the total of 103,434.48.
That's correct.
Correct. All right. So that's the motion. Seconded by Cindy. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Doubleday project, everything was submitted prior to finance reviewing, so those are all set to go under abstracts. Village election, I think it was since the last meeting that we received word that it will be held on September 15th. That's about all the information we have right now, other than the fact that we can use the machine ballots that were printed with the March 18th date. I have talked to NICOM. They're still kind of waiting further direction. I'm still accepting absentee applications, although they have suggested waiting a while to send them out because we do have plenty of time for that, but just in case something else comes down by executive order. So we're accepting the applications on the website. We're just holding off on mailing them out at this point. And anybody who's submitted a ballot for the March 18th election before that was called off, those will certainly be counted and they don't need to resubmit. Doubleday field games, we have canceled at least through June 30th, as recreation activities are not slated to begin until phase 4. So we're hoping for a July 1st start. I think it will depend on what kind of additional restrictions come down from the state. So we're kind of on a wait and see with this right now, but we're proceeding at this point as if, we're going to be playing at that point. Most of our staff returned on May 18th. We had safety plan guidelines from DOH. NYMER also sent some specific recommendations for DPW staff that were reviewed with staff and are being implemented. We still, Jane's still working at home because she has an office she shares with Mitch, and she's able to do that safely. So we're continuing with that at this point. And we are asking those who visit the village office to please wear masks when they come in, as we're wearing them when we go up to the counter. Summer parks, the week before Memorial Day weekend, the Friday before, Governor Cuomo did open beaches for Memorial Day weekend with extensive restrictions, which I attached to your agenda. Due to those restrictions in part, and also waiting additional information from New York State DOH, we're not able to open our village parks at this point. And I have a call into DOH, which I haven't heard back yet, but so we're hoping to salvage at least part of the summer.
May I ask
Yes, Joe?
a question on the parks? Is it possible to be ready to go if they do open the parks? I mean, will we have to wait for a certificate of?
We have to have a permit. I mean, DOH did send an email the middle of last week, which, was because they had to wait to get specific information from the governor's executive orders. I mean, once the executive order is given, on that Friday, it takes several days to actually get the document prepared and distributed. So we did get an email from DOH that clearly stressed, even though the governor opened the beaches, we still need that permit from DOH.
So my question is there a way to get the permit in hand and then wait the signal from the governor that we can use it?
Well, we have the signal from the governor. We can use it based on 50% usage and that type of thing, which, I mean, if you look at the parks right now, that doesn't leave you the capacity for a lot of people. And if you can't 6 foot social distance, you have to wear masks. We have to rope up off the pavilion, the picnic areas. Glimmerglass is in the same situation as us, even though they were able to open because of the amount of beach frontage that they do have. But you can't use the pavilions, you can't use the picnic tables, and that stands. I mean, all those recommendations will be incorporated in what we have with DOH, so.
Richard?
I went to Glimmerglass yesterday. They're not charging a fee. They are stopping people at the entrance to educate them. A lot of people aren't following the instructions, and they had staff going through the place to re-educate people. They even had a park policeman there to re-educate people. It was lovely. It was not overwhelmed. There is no fee. I think it's a reasonable alternative for people to know that if they ask. And they're not going to be a lot of tourists there, so the availability was there. The parking lot, they had blocked off half the spots, or actually they asked people to park every other spot. It couldn't have been more than 20% filled. There's plenty of space.
Thank you, Richard. Joe?
As to Lakefront Park, there was quite heavy use on Sunday by all accounts. Saturday and Monday were well used too. What do these orders, how do these orders relate? I know it's not a beach, but it's the public park. Are there any things we're supposed to be doing by way?
Well, I mean, the restriction there as well is you can't use picnic tables. So, and people should be social distancing and wearing masks when they cannot.
Cindy?
Should we consider opening the restrooms in Lakefront Park as well as at Doubleday? Currently, we have a porta potty at Lakefront that people are taking advantage of. It might actually be more hygienic to open our restroom building.
I think Mitch and I are going to be talking about that tomorrow because I had a couple questions today, at work, and I think we're going to have to, though, realize that we do that, and then we're going to have to be continually cleaning those restrooms.
Absolutely.
Terry, was there a water issue last year at Lakefront or no? A leak of some sort?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay, I was thinking that was one of the reasons we moved something in. Okay. Jean?
On the picnic table issue, so people aren't allowed to sit at picnic tables at all?
No, they're not. And they're not at Glimmerglass either. I mean, they have not put out their picnic tables and you can't put up your own. You can't bring a portable picnic table and put it up. blankets like 10 feet apart.
Because we do have picnic tables at lakefront.
My understanding was they were turned upside down and fixed together so they couldn't be used. I don't know, you know,
People may have taken it upon themselves
to take them apart. Okay. I think maybe the best thing is to remove them then at that point,
Yeah.
at least for now, until that restriction's lifted.
Then
Jim, I'm sorry, Jim?
The tricky part with family units, unfortunately, how do we separate family units from other groups of people? You know, it's, you know,
Well,
yeah,
I mean, we follow what the state guidelines are, and those restrictions are not to rope off any picnic areas, pavilions. It's very clear in the executive order. Those are things that people cannot use at this point.
Yeah, the summary which Terry nicely put in was right from the governor's PowerPoint. And it's keeping areas of social gathering closed. For instance, designated picnic areas, playgrounds, pavilions, arcades, and amusement rides. We don't have those, but it definitely does reference that. I know at 3 Mile, the picnic tables were stacked, you know, up and didn't appear to be used all weekend. So you're right. It may have been somebody took it upon themselves to set them down in lakefront, but and if that's the case, then we'll have the crew remove them. So it's not an enticement.
Ellen, is 3 Mile even open?
Well,
People have kayaks up there, so they're able to utilize that.
exactly. They were definitely using it to kayak. Jean.
So if somebody brought their own chair, they could hang out. You just can't sit at a picnic table.
Well, I mean, you have to maintain social distancing. So, I mean, it's really not encouraged. It's at this point. So
I'm just
I think-
thinking because Ferry Spring and 3 Mile are technically kind of open because of the kayak racks.
mhm.
So there are clearly people going there.
Yeah.
So
You know, I think as long as people continue, they're being socially responsible about this, socially distancing, taking a mask with them, etc., then they won't ruin it for everybody else. I think in this situation, I think Governor Cuomo sort of got pushed against the wall on this, because if he didn't open New York, everybody was going to be going to New Jersey or Connecticut. So it really had to become a 3-state, let's do this in sync and try and do it responsibly. So we are trying to do it responsibly as well. Any other questions on that? Right. So that was.
I have a question.
Mhm.
Mitch is here.
Oh, hi, Mitch.
So do you want us to put the docks in and be prepared? I mean, what are we doing here? We need some clarification of what's going to happen.
Mitch, can I ask you, how many days does it take to get the docks in at 3 Mile and at, that's one park, and at Ferry Spring? What time frame are we looking at?
With a good week, it's about 5 days for each park.
Okay.
Just to be safe, it's a week for each park.
And do you see, I know that DPW is taking on some painting and striping duties and other things right now. Would you see, the soonest these parks are going to be open under recreation is phase 4, which will be July 1, as Terry has indicated. Would you see that possibility of the last 2 weeks in June? If we don't drop back a phase or anything because our metrics have changed, would you see that as a possibility?
Yes, I think we could, but some of the other things are going to have to be put on hold, to make sure we get all this stuff in line. I mean, to make sure we get all this stuff in order, we're going to need to pull some other guys from other jobs to make sure this all gets done. And
then there's the added question of, it's not just getting our New York State DOH permit, it's making sure we have certified lifeguards in place. I don't know, Terry, if you have any sense of that.
No, I mean, I'm kind of waiting to get a call back from DOH to have a discussion with them on things, but, I think it also just depends too on some of those restrictions being lifted, because the amount of area that's, being, you can't utilize right now. And, you're going to have to cut your parking area in half. You're going to have to, essentially cut your, beach in half, and then you're going to have staff that's, a couple of caretakers at 3 Mile and one at Ferry Springs, basically enforce these as well as do their normal duties. So, as well as the lifeguards, being able to do that. So I think there's a little bit of a ways to go yet to see what happens.
Richard?
I'm against putting in the docks until we're definitely within a few days of opening, both by approval and by having staff. My fear is if we put in the docks and we don't have lifeguards, we're setting up a really high.
Yeah, I concur. Other comments?
Can I
Jean.
chime in?
Jean was put, Mitch, can Jean?
Okay, yep, Jane can go first.
You might have had your hand up, Mitch, but I can't see you.
Do we know if there are any, if the rules have been bent at all for lifeguard recertification?
Well, I'm waiting for, like I said, I'm waiting for DOH, so.
Okay, Mitch?
I agree with Richard with waiting till the last minute, but if we wait till the last minute, then again, the weather might bite us. That's my only thing. Because if we put the docks in now, people are going to take advantage of it and do whatever they want.
Yeah.
I'd rather get bitten on that end than have somebody use it and get hurt and have a significant lawsuit and liability issue.
I think that basically we're in a little bit of a wait and see on this. If we got the permit in the next week or so and we were able to get certified lifeguards, I think there would be time to move and maybe pick one park to begin opening first and just work it from there. But I think, a lot of this is subjective right now until we know more of those details and we know whether we have that permit. Jean, did you want to say something else? Oh, no, Cindy.
I just wondered if you knew off the top of her head what our capacity according to the state is, because if we're at 50% capacity, there must be a number that they use, but whether that's even physically possible at 6 feet is a big question.
Well, that is the question. That's one of the questions I have for them, so.
Okay.
Joe.
Yeah, the question, I'll come back to it. It slipped my mind while I was listening to Cindy.
Any other?
I just want to say, people, I think, have been very understanding of the situation. We've had a couple of phone calls here today from people who either didn't realize or were looking to see if we had some kind of timeline. And, we're still understanding when I said, I really can't guess. We're hoping maybe, sometime in July, but we don't know yet. And we are advising that Glimmerglass Park is open, and we're doing the best we can right now until we get some more answers back from the state.
I remember
Joe?
my question. Lifeguard certification. I know that it's typically been done at the sports center and earlier in the season, but now that we're in the summer, is there any ability to do that certification if need be at the lake with the appropriate?
Again, I don't know. I'm in contact with Department of Health, but I will say that's not the only place people get their certifications. Some will get them when they're away at college, that type of thing. It's not always just from here.
Okay.
All right. Anything else? All right. Thank you very much, Terry, for your report. So that brings us to new business, and Cindy has put together a really complete summary of all the parking changes as a result of the TEP and Doubleday projects. So you've had that document. It was in your packet. Are there any questions? Cindy, do you want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'd make a motion to set a public hearing for the regular June meeting to consider the parking changes that are necessitated by the TEP and Doubleday Field projects.
Second.
Second by Richard. All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. And Terry, I don't know about this. The Art Association has requested a change of use of the ballroom from May to October.
Yes, actually, she had put that in last month and I hadn't seen the email until the day after the trustee meeting, but usually May is the first month that they utilize the ballroom under the contract. But of course, with, you know, COVID and having to cancel all the exhibitions, they weren't able to do that. So they wanted to change their May activities to October. Right now, the October calendar is clear. I certainly think it's fine. So it's just, I just need a motion from the board to be able to do that because it adjusts their contract for this year.
Great. That was my only question is, were we bumping anything in October? But we're not. So
No.
someone want to make that motion?
So
Have
moved.
them, by Mac, second by Jim, all in favor?
Hey.
All right.
Aye.
And then also under new business, we were going to discuss some possibilities this summer to support our business community, particularly our Main Street business community, with what we have for outside dining and vending. Let me just say that, as you all know, we have a kind of a dining law on the books. Our many restaurants, in fact, I was asked today which restaurants don't avail themselves of that, and I couldn't even think of one. You know, even ice cream shops have tended in the prior years to use that brick paver in front of their business to kind of expand during the summertime, and it really enlivens our Main Street, and it actually provides, if you think about it, accessibility for people who might not be able to get up a step or a stoop into the business itself. So we have that already on the books. I know when this sort of was discussed before, Joe wanted to make sure that we were talking to the chamber to see what they were interested in. I did note that I've been since early March on the Otsego County Economic Task Force with many people, including Tara, the executive director of the chamber. So we've been having these discussions back and forth of what might be good. So I did, though, in preparation for this meeting, speak to her and email with her this past week. And it was very interesting because I think part of me was thinking, okay, not much traffic. Should we try and do some street closure so that we can kind of expand things? And, you know, she liked all kind of our ideas that we were sort of floating, you know, continuing our dining on Main Street and expanding it potentially to retail, how we could do that. She actually said that she couldn't make a recommendation on closing on the street. She said, I feel like anytime that's brought up, even in the name of helping them, there are only about 50% of the businesses at best that makes happy, and then 50% who really don't want the street shut down. So, you know, we've got different businesses, different personalities. It's hard to come up with something, but you know, there was the concept, okay, maybe we only do it on select Saturdays or something like that, but it's not, don't forget, it's just maybe the businesses that might, some of them not like it. We have other things. Whenever we have induction weekend, farmers, our poor farmers market vendors, it's extremely difficult for them to get their vendors in and out of that farmers market. So anytime you kind of close that area, Main Street, you really are inconveniencing people, and it's not always shall I say, to the benefit of our local businesses, because our farmers market is very much a local business. I know Cindy and I have sort of had our thinking caps on about it, and she has kind of reviewed all our existing laws, etc., on our dining law, our special event, etc., to see what we might be able to do within kind of the scope of that. And also in this time of the pandemic, what we could do pursuant to our being on New York Forward at this time. And she did send around something. So Cindy, I'm going to let you take over now and just kind of walk us through some of this.
Yeah, so in looking through our laws, I think there are 3 that directly relate to the types of issues that we've been talking about. And I actually feel like we've done a lot of the legwork in the past 3 to 5 years to address this in a way that may not have been possible prior to that. So the first Ellen already referred to, and that has to do with outdoor dining. So we have a law in place that allows restaurants to use the public property immediately adjacent to their facilities for outdoor seating, which is fantastic. We know that that's been working well. We don't charge a fee for it. So as far as restaurants go, it seems like we're on the right track and have started to provide some options for them. There's also a portion of our law that deals with the outdoor display of merchandise. That's section 277 on private property. So this doesn't affect a lot of businesses, but there are some businesses in the business district that have private property adjacent to their establishments. And restaurants, you can use it. If you're doing retail sales, there's a pretty simple permit process. You can tell this law is a little old because I think it's a $5 permit to apply to use that ground. But I feel like if you have private property, we've also covered that. Perhaps the most important part of this is a third part of our law, which has to do with non-restaurant sales on public property. And we have covered that through special events, which is why I drafted what I did and sent it around to you. So by establishing a special event, the Board of Trustees establishes certain locations. Those could be on the sidewalk, they could be in the street, they could be in public parks. I think in this case, we're talking about on the sidewalk, where businesses can submit an application to vend. This is what happens induction weekend. We need to be a little careful because we can't discriminate. We can't say only if you own a business on Main Street can you participate in this. But that said, we did build in some safety mechanisms, knowing on induction weekend this was going to be a problem, and presumably during the pandemic it could as well, so that if you are within 3 feet of a display window at the front of a building, then you have to have that business owner's permission to be there. So presumably that means that if we did establish a special event for all or part of the summer, most of the people who would take advantage are those who own bricks and mortar stores who want to sell in front of their own store. We would have to be aware of the possibility of someone else who wants to take advantage of that. And Martin and I had a long discussion today about the ins and outs of this, which is why the document that I sent you had much more whereas clause than it did resolution clause, because his feeling was that it really needed to be spelled out why we are in the position we are now in case someone were to take us to court, which he thinks is highly unlikely, but we do have to be aware of that possibility. Those permits are issued by Terry. She handles it during induction weekend. Presumably if we did this time, she could handle it again. We as the Board of Trustees establish the fee. So I think in this case, we might want to establish There's no fee, no application fee, no use fee, but that's something that we do. And there are some really specific requirements. So there needs to be an insurance certificate that names the village as an additional insured to handle liability issues. And it's important to know that we don't regulate the sale of alcohol. So that, and this has been a sticking point in the past. On public property, someone who sells alcoholic beverages needs to work through the state to get permission to do that, which I understand would be extremely difficult to accomplish. So if that's what you're selling, that may be the one type of business this does not work especially well for.
All right, thank you, Cindy. I think that was a good summary of our current laws and how we could essentially do something creative for this summer. Are there thoughts and discussion? Joe, I'm sorry, I saw you first.
Well, I certainly want to cite Jim's thoughts, which were in 2 emails and were very creative and far-ranging. And to try to consider some of what he proposed in terms of the legal framework that Cindy just described would be worth doing. And I was just checking back the minutes of the last meeting when we made our decision on parking fees, which was razor thin, 4-3 in terms of not changing them. But I must say, not to, well, only for the feeling further enlightened by what Jim had to say, we may want to consider a more integrated approach to our resolution that Cindy is drafted. And if it is true that no one can please all of the chamber all of the time, I still like the idea of doing some partial close. So for example, if somebody wants to come in and apply for a restaurant dining or restaurant vending, we would decide on some limit of how many metal barrier buffers we would provide to close off parking for safety purposes, so that if people are going to have the permission to use the sidewalk in these extraordinary times, not just the brick pavers, but more of the sidewalk, then the sidewalk would become a step down into the street and then around that site and then back onto the sidewalk to continue. I agree with Ellen that the idea of closing the entire street, even for 1 or 2 days a week, is almost too, it's too extreme. It'll never please everybody. It'll never probably produce all of the value we want. But if we have a way of doing it incrementally or discreetly, depending on volume and demand, and it might be more useful. And with that, because we would be sacrificing some parking spaces, and having been persuaded by some of what I read of Jim, and I know we need to discuss this as a group, the idea of getting our local community people back into the village on an impulse outing without facing the daunting parking or the consideration of parking fees, I'm willing to revisit that. So it's kind of a ball of several different issues that has to be considered against the legal framework that Cindy described, but I found Jim's thoughts very creative.
Richard.
I'm going to discuss some specificities here. I've talked, as a number of you have talked, to various merchants, and some merchants are against it and some merchants are for it. The restaurateurs are very much for it, because even if they get allowed to open, the social distancing requirements within the buildings is going to make it very difficult for them to actually stay profitable. They're probably going to be opening 1 out of 4 tables, which makes it next to nothing. I would, initially I thought, like Jim, I wanted to close down Main Street from Chestnut to Pioneer and turn that into a mall. But I see your point, Ellen and Cindy, that that's not going to work. I think it's reasonable to close down that area and then work on divvying it out to the various merchants in town so that everybody can reasonably get space to do what they want to do. I think it's reasonable to close it down all day Sundays. And since you've brought up the farmers market, which meets on Saturday, then on Friday afternoons through evenings. That'll give our merchants, especially our restaurateurs, the ability to have at least 2 full days a week. And by not opening it on Saturdays, that would obviate the problem of getting in and out of the farmers market. It should obviate the problem of all the various stores. They'd be giving up Sundays, and they'd be giving up afternoon and evenings on Fridays. So they wouldn't be giving up that much. So that's my recommendation.
All right. Other thoughts? Tim?
Thank you. As I've shared earlier, we are in a tough spot and we know we're in a tough spot, and how we're going to get through it in the next 3 months is going to be tough, because the things we did last year may not work this year. And as I've mentioned, I think this is a situation where we're going to have to wing it week by week and try to adjust on the fly to what seems to be working and what seems to be not working, because this is going to be completely unknown territory for the village government and for the merchants and for the residents. This is going to be a very creative exercise, and I don't know what else to say. It's going to be tough, and it's going to be a creative exercise. What can I say?
Thank you. Others?
Alan, if I might. So I was certainly felt favorable towards the idea of a pedestrian Main Street. I did read Jean's letter, or Janine's letter, and I chatted with Rich. But now understanding the full scope and getting some other input, I do understand how that would be a logistical issue for us, and also for enforcement, et cetera, things like that. So I would find a good common ground in partial closures, as you said, Ellen, whether that be from one parking spot, the corner of Chestnut, running down, closing some parking and extending the sidewalk, obviously, into the road a bit. Because when we're talking about doing sidewalk vending, and what I would think would be pretty significant sidewalk vending, we're going to start running out of room for safe pedestrian passage on the sidewalks. So keeping a traffic flow on Main Street is a smart idea, but possibly considering a way to barricade off some of the parking spots, whether it be on both sides or one side, and divvy out the space that's available to our vendors for commerce or dining, or what's possible, I think is a good compromise. That's my little input. I don't know what the best answer is, but I would like to discuss more.
I think these are all good ideas. Thank you. Cindy?
I was just going to add that while I think it's important to keep traffic moving on Main Street, vehicular traffic that is, as well as pedestrian traffic, I think it's also important to maintain some parking. And I say that for 2 reasons. One is that we actually have a delivery system right now that is working fairly well. In fact, we restriped the loading zones today, if you haven't been downtown yet. And I think whatever we do, we need to make provisions for restaurants and retail to get the things that they deliver to customers. The other is that I think that there will be a good segment of the population that doesn't have any interest in wearing a mask and walking down Main Street, but they may still want to get takeout, or they may still want to get curbside pickup at the farmer's market or something. And I think it's important for that part of the population that isn't ready to get out yet, that they still have a place where they can go downtown, park safely, and get their takeout, get their vegetables, get whatever it is that they need to do as well. I think for some people, getting out is going to be important. For others, it's going to be really scary. And they're not going to want to walk down Main Street.
Yeah, excellent point, Cindy. Other comments? Jim?
I did want to add what I've mentioned before is, and I know there's a downside to it, but I would consider eliminating paid parking this summer. I know it's not a popular idea, but I would. I think that might bite us bad. If somebody pulls into Main Street and 75% of the spaces are empty, and we want to charge them to park, if I were in that car, I'd keep going. It's going to be tough. I know the village is in a tough financial spot and working hard to close those gaps, sure. And again, I go back to the great unknown. The summertime is going to be the great unknown. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Richard?
In response to Jim, actually paid parking works to the merchant's advantage so that spots are not taken up long-term. It also means if they're empty spots, if you're going to allow driving, people can pull in and pick up whatever they need on their, picking up from the restaurants or such. If you allow parking, free parking, all those spots will be taken for hours at a time. It'll actually decrease access to the restaurants for takeout. So my opinion stands. I think we need to make some revenue back from parking. I do not believe that we are going to chase anybody who comes to visit Cooperstown away for the problem of parking for $2 for 2 hours or something. I mean, I just don't. So I don't think there's an issue that we need to cancel paid parking for the summer.
Yeah, anyone else? Joe?
I guess my understanding of the parking, Richard, would be that there would still be 2-hour limits and there would be ticketing, but there just wouldn't be a fee charged. I'm not saying that as an advocate, I'm just saying that people wouldn't be able to, and usually people parked, the concern was people spent hours there because they were spending hours on the Hall of Fame and hours at museums that aren't available to them. The other point.
Can I respond to that point real quickly? I recognize that we still have 2-hour parking, but it's a lot easier to enforce when there's a sticker in the car that says when the 2 hours is up for that car. And it's really more likely to be enforced when there's paid parking than just randomly 2-hour parking.
Okay, I'm going to let Joe finish his comments.
The second comment I had was picking up on what McGuire was talking about as well. One of the optical things that could not turn out very well is if we do these complete street closures, whatever designated times we have, a Friday or a Sunday or whatever. So you give a party and nobody comes. I mean, the street will look like a wasteland. So to be an advocate, I guess, for this alternate view of letting people who are running the businesses be the applicants for this license to extend into the sidewalk, and again with limits so that it would never would be 100% elimination of parking availability, but just try it out. If there are little pockets of this and it catches on and people are going to gravitate to the outdoor venue and they see it, better that than everything blocked off and nobody's really doing much with it.
Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
Okay, perfect. So, obviously we're going to have to enforce social distancing in some fashion, or strongly encourage it, or purchase signage of some kind if we can. And I don't want to close the streets down, and I don't want to take parking spots away from people who want to park in them. But if we're going to be able to encourage social distancing, and I had felt that the idea behind, closing parts of Main Street or reducing parking spots in some areas so that vendors can set up shop was so that people would be able to comfortably be down there, and knowing that at most times they'll be able to be a safe distance away from one another. So while our sidewalks are wide and pretty spacious, I think that, if we're asking everyone to just kind of stay outside, be respectful, not be inside in tight quarters, we're really going to have to figure out how to accommodate a lot of people on the sidewalks. Now, like somebody just said, maybe they won't even come, but I do feel that it's important that we do something, but also recognizing that that some folks might not be fond of losing parking spots. If we're going to maintain that social distancing and encourage people to come down because they can do it in a safe way, we're going to need to consider additional space than just on the sidewalks. I think we might need to think about that.
I'm sorry, Jean?
So on the parking issue, I am one of the people who voted to keep parking the same, but I'm having misgivings about that. I think it's true that there are probably a lot of people who are popping downtown for 10 or 15 minutes to pick something up. And we do have a few 15-minute free parking spots. And if you bought a parking pass, it wouldn't be an issue, but I don't think we want to be deterring people from doing takeout and picking things up.
I think this was discussed at the last one, and sort of the reasons for not doing it were certainly discussed at the last meeting. We have now gone ahead and paid the company to get this equipment all up and operational. And we could have included that 25 cents had we waited till July 1st to institute paid parking, but because it was thrown in at the last minute and we were going to open. So to me, it's sort of like the die was cast a month ago with the vote that occurred then. And the information was there then, and we all voted accordingly. I think at this point, I would like to see us do something concrete. The bottom line is, if you read the document Cindy put together, and there are a couple little wording changes I'd like to make, but basically we're talking phase 3 at best could be opening by the middle of June. So if we do something, which is the restaurants, etc., and so if we begin slowly, I agree with Jim. We're in unknown territory. Maybe we could look at this and say, okay, let's begin with first and third Sundays of the month, no parking. And really kind of promote that as shop Sundays, or, I don't know, something like that, where we're not running into the farmer's market and some other Saturday businesses, or do it on a Friday. Pick a day, because I know Tara is interested. She had already begun lining up music on Main. So if we did do, say, 12 to 6 open, no parking, Sunday shopping, very much pedestrian oriented, we could have a band playing in Pioneer Park, sort of liven the whole thing up. So I think there are ways to do this. I think much of this is unknown, and I think we need to sort of move with something. Cindy?
I agree with you. I think we do have to have some flexibility. And for that reason, I think declaring a special event actually gives us maximum flexibility. I would suggest that we start with allowing people to come out on the sidewalk. And if we find after the first week or weekend, depending on how we word this, that there are enough people to warrant closing off parking, then we do that as another step. I don't think that we need to have another resolution to make that happen. And if we find that there are so many people that we then need to close off the street, that becomes, yet another step. But having spent a lot of time downtown this weekend, having merchants on the sidewalk this weekend would not negatively impacted anyone's ability to social distance. So I hate to go to this point and say in the middle of June, we're going to close off parking or we're going to close off a street at any point in time, when I feel like we could tell people to come out, and then after that first weekend evaluate and exercise the type of flexibility that Jim was talking about.
So basically though, you're, all right, can I just do just a little wordsmith first on the thing? Absolutely. Okay, and the third paragraph, whereas the Mohawk Valley region, including Otsego County, began to unpause with phase one, inserting with phase one on May 15th, semicolon, with pause, I'm sorry, it should be phase and not pause.
Yeah, it should.
With phase two, including professional services and retail, potentially beginning May 29th, semicolon. And then pretty much again, phase three, involving restaurants and food services, potentially beginning June 12th. And phase four, involving arts, recreation, and entertainment, potentially beginning June 26th. So those were there. Then where we're really beginning a sort of a resolution is that last paragraph. So we could fill that in for, you know, essentially our entire season, you know, from declares essentially whatever, June 1st to Columbus Day or something, to be a special event. So you're of the mind that this will go ahead and allow the other retail establishments, candy stores, clothing stores, etc., to set up on the street, much the same as our dining law. And but then if we want to close the street, say in 4 weeks, we say, okay, now that we've entered phase four, we really need this space. Where is that? Just under our special event, we can come back, or we can say in this somehow with the possibility of street closures included. Can we add that wording or what?
Yeah, so we declare as the Board of Trustees what spaces are available for vending. Keep in mind that the more spaces we include, the more potential there is for vendors from outside our community to also take advantage of this if they see that as a viable option for them. I think that if we say the vending takes place on the sidewalk and our intention is to close the street, that as the Board of Trustees, if we're not moving vendors out there, you know, we have the authority to close the street for a special event. And we could certainly add that.
Or reserve it, essentially. As
Yeah.
you say, we have that. So, okay, all right. Joe.
You know, in fact, our situation here is not really a special event. It's kind of a state of emergency, a health emergency. And I'm wondering if we can, thinking it in those terms, we are trying to get the people who run businesses able to conduct their businesses in the state of emergency. And under the circumstances, that means getting outdoors, having more air circulation around the customer base. So is there, can this be done as a kind of a public health, you know, consistent with our limited authority in public health, but it's a special event strikes me as a discretionary thing. Oh, we're gonna have a party, we're gonna have we're gonna do something, but this is really not driven by that. We're driven by this state of emergency and these, you know, the constraints that the state has appropriately placed on us. And so we're now trying to accommodate our economy to that. And so I'm, you know, in that context, I'm less upset or concerned about anti-discrimination issues with outside vendors coming in and just wanting to be part of our special event, as opposed to enabling our merchants to earn a livelihood. And I don't know if there's a legal angle to distinguish between a special event and the state of emergency we're really dealing with here.
In talking with Martin, if we want to use the provisions of our vending law, which are well spelled out and I believe well tested, Terry can weigh in on whether or not that's the case or not, then the terminology that we need to use is special event. We could call it any sort of special event that we want. but that's the terminology that's established in our vending law.
Right. And we are in our whereas clauses describing what our condition is with the virus and we're operating. But I just wanted to see if there was a way to make this as general as possible. And in the case of experience, 2, 3, 4 weeks into this, I mean, would we be able to convene a special meeting and redirect how this is going?
Well, I wonder if we should declare, for instance, June as a special event, and then at our next meeting declare July as a special event and continue throughout our season that way, so that we're not authorizing something for months that we may decide after a few weeks is not working for whatever reason. And I also think we could add at the end of that resolution, the Board of Trustees reserves the right to close on-street parking and or Main Street to ensure appropriate social distancing.
I think that's a great way to go forward with it, to do it month by month, to begin with June. And I think it's very possible in that last paragraph to be a special event dash, we can call it what we want. Cooperstown Strong, a shop local, a feet on the street, you name it. We could call it something that is relevant to this. Okay, I'm sorry, Joe, did you want to say something?
Logistically, if we did it that way, would these vendors then have to reapply every month? If our duration is only, the special event lasts a month, and we're going to re-announce, what are the issues there, if any?
I would imagine
the special event terminates, and then we're doing something again. Let's say it was
That's a good point.
So I do whatever the rest of our codes require. I think we should take that into consideration. We could even grandfather in the event we extend. If this ended entirely at the discretion of the board, then existing vending authorities would be retained would remain valid or something.
Yeah, Cindy, that is true. I think it makes
Yeah.
more sense to revisit it, to establish, whatever, June 1 through, what would that be? October 5th or something? What's the Columbus Day? I don't know.
Columbus Day this year would be the 12th of October.
Yeah.
On the
So
day.
maybe June 1 through October 12th. And, we realize, as Jim has said, things are we'll have to be flexible on this. We may find that, what we're trying isn't working, where we're gathering bigger crowds. It may be that the Hall of Fame is looking to open July 1, like the Sports Center. They may have a plan in action. We may find that there's a big resurgence and we do have to rethink some of this, but at least the other retailers would be able to have their ability to have something on the street as well as just our restaurants.
I seem to recall that we may have the right to cancel a special event, and I'm just looking for that language.
I just want to voice my support for doing it the way that Cindy's proposed, and having it on the sidewalks. I think that's a good way to go, and we might find that we have to go bigger. But I like that we are going to take an incremental step.
Cindy, what was your word? I know you're looking up something.
That's all right.
The last line you were adding, the Board of Trustees reserves the right to close streets as needed during this special event time. What was your wording?
I have the Board of Trustees reserves the right to close on-street parking spaces and/or Main Street to ensure appropriate social distancing.
And or Main Street. So not specifying any area, just and or Main Street.
Mhm.
You want to be, I think you want to be clear that it can be partial. You know, if you didn't do it for all, you can't do it for any. I think we want to avoid that outcome because we may only be closing some parking at any given time, right?
Yeah, but you haven't really stipulated it other than on-street parking spaces and Main Street. It's not like you're stipulating any areas, correct?
Well, what's the lingo again?
So what I have now is the Board of Trustees reserves the right to close on-street parking spaces and/or all or part of Main Street to ensure appropriate social distancing.
Well, I think that works.
I do. I think it's, and or it's broad enough and variable enough. Okay, and you were looking something else up, Cindy?
I seem to recall when this law was written that there was a clause that was added that gave the village the right to cancel, but I'm beginning to think that might be in the outdoor dining law and not in the vending law.
To cancel the outdoor dining law?
Well, if things, there was concern that first summer, if things, went amiss, if there were unforeseen circumstances, we didn't anticipate that, we didn't want to be in a position where we were committed to it for an extended period of time. But I am thinking now, because I don't see it in the vending law.
I'm looking through the outdoor eating area one to see if there was something in that.
So yeah, so in the outdoor dining law, it says the Village of Cooperstown reserves the right and power to temporarily order the discontinuation of the operation of outdoor eating areas at any time because of anticipated or actual problems or conflicts in the use of the sidewalk area. And then it goes on in more detail.
Yeah.
So if we are going to look at this for an extended period from June to October, I do think we should probably have that sort of out clause, in case things happen that, who knows, if there's another spike, we may decide that we have to stop this altogether. And presumably the state government would take responsibility for that, but we certainly wouldn't want a local law that conflicts.
I think we could add that clause H, which is in the outdoor eating area one, because I think it covers all the bases, to the extent possible, the operator shall be given prior written notice of the time period, and it outlines some of the situations. So I almost think if we take that and make sure it's in ours, don't you think? This present one would be good. Since we didn't find it in our special event sort of regulations, we did succinctly cover it in the outdoor eating area regulation. It'd be good to just kind of put that in there.
What about doing it month by month with the clause that people don't have to necessarily reapply, like grandfathered in?
I like the idea of being a little flexible about it, to open it June 1 through October 12th. So people sort of have that belief, because if, I'm thinking, why bother? They're going to let me do this for June and then, maybe not July. I think it would be good to have it in there. And with that clause, we're just adding, we have some flexibility, We've now found that the visitation to the village and the traffic does not enable us to do this. To have that additional clause in there will allow us to be flexible. I think it's something we're going to be reviewing throughout the summer and certainly at the June board meeting, July, August, September, you know, and in between, if we see it, we could gather and say, look, something's not working here. I think it's something, because it is slightly unknown, we can't just set it in stone and walk away. I think we will have to look at it. I do like the idea of establishing the whole season right off the bat.
And my other question was for Terry, and that's the insurance requirement. Do you recall what we require for like induction weekend?
I would just, there, it's indicated on the application, so I would just put as indicated on the appropriate application. I think that covers it.
So I think if you would like, I might be able to share my screen with you and we can see what this says.
Great. You copied and pasted quickly, Cindy.
Cindy,
Yes, well done.
I just have a clarification question.
Yep.
Sure.
So it says, in light of the COVID-19 pandemic with vending permitted on village sidewalks in the business or commercial districts, does that need to be more specific? Or because we have a commercial district down here by Price Chopper, you know, right along there. So I'm just wondering if we want to specify that it's the commercial business district downtown, or would that be considered discriminating specifically? Because the way I'm reading it, someone could just show up and be like, yeah, I want a sidewalk permit for across the street from Stewart's in front of CBS. Or am I not understanding this correctly?
But they own that property, right?
Is it private? I don't know for sure. So if somebody
Oh,
else
I
does-
pictured them in front of their building. I see what you're saying. You're saying a sidewalk in front of their business.
Right.
Yeah, I just think since we have more than one commercial district, that we would want to be specific about it. Just the language. Or maybe I'm being too nitpicky. Feel free
No,
to.
No, and I left in commercial district because I wondered if anyone on Railroad Ave might want to do this. Spurbeck's or the Green Cow or the distillery. You are probably correct that each of those establishments has some private property that would not require this.
Okay, well, I trust your judgment.
No, but I had not thought about Price Chopper or Stewart's, and I tend to agree with you that I'm not sure that those are appropriate places for sidewalk vending.
I mean, I feel like that's probably not the first thought in someone's mind, is to just set up shop in front of CVS on the public sidewalk, because that's kind of an obscure thing to do, but just for specificity.
I don't think that's even come up before really with our special events. Has it, Cindy?
It hasn't, but you know, we've never allowed it either. So we could just make this the business district, and that would limit it to Main and Pioneer.
Well, I do think your Railroad Avenue example is an excellent one. Would this preclude that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely don't disagree that opening up Railroad to be included in this is a good idea. There's a good chance I'm being too nitpicky. I just thought that I would bring it up opposed to not bringing it up.
I think I would leave commercials, Cindy.
Yeah.
Because actually, isn't Price Chopper, or we didn't change that, did we, with our rezoning?
We
Remember-
did.
We
So
did. So
it's commercial now.
it was business before. Yeah. I would just leave it at that. I really would. And deal with that as it comes in.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other comments or corrections or changes you'd like to see in this? Then Cindy, would you like to make the motion that we establish this special event? Oh, what did we name it? I think it's good to do
It needs
that.
Yeah.
Needs a
I
title.
like feet on the street personally. I think that's great, Ellen.
Okay, special event, feet on the street, even though they might not be feet on the street, even if we don't close the street initially.
A little macabre to me, but I don't know. Autonomy, I guess it is, huh?
Well, you know, if you say shop local, it's kind of like a little banal because we all say that, or support our community, something like that.
Could there be something, you know, the alfresco thing, Cooperstown Outdoors or Cooperstown Business Outdoor? We're trying to make it.
Cooperstown Outdoors is good.
Yeah.
I like that, Joe. Communicates what we're doing.
Do we all like that, Cooperstown Outdoors?
Is that too close to Otsego Outdoors?
And that was my only thought. And then I was trying to, yeah.
We're the only people who are going to recognize that it's close to Otsego outdoors.
How about open doors?
I like Joe's idea best. It's simple. It states what we're doing.
Okay, what was it?
Cooperstown Outdoors.
Oh, I thought Max said, yeah, okay, Cooperstown.
I said feet on the street,
Oh, okay,
but technically they're feet on the sidewalk.
yeah. All right, Cooperstown Outdoors.
And
To be
the
a
pavers.
special,
Don't forget the pavers, Mac.
True, you're right.
all right, Cooperstown Outdoors. So, and with the changes that Cindy has workshopped here into it, is there now a motion with that title?
Terry, should this resolution have a resolution number?
I'll see what we had, so don't worry about it at this point.
All right,
Whatever
I'll
the
make-
next one is, I'll use.
So I'll make a motion to approve the resolution for the Cooperstown Outdoors special event.
Made by Cindy. Cindy,
Second.
you will stop sharing now. I
Yep.
can't see everybody.
There we go.
Seconded by Jean. All in favor?
I
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you all. And I appreciate it. I know we're in difficult and sort of unknown waters, as Jim has said, but I think this at least lets us begin a process, and we'll stay flexible and see what else we can do this summer to support our community. I don't have anything else except.
I do.
Oh, okay, wait, I wanted to look. Wait. Yep.
I
go
do
ahead,
too as
Richard.
well.
Observation. These last two meetings have gone very well, and we don't seem to be the worse for wear or not going through every department or every committee's minutes. And it really sped the meeting up today. We did all of the boilerplate in under 45 minutes. I'd like us to think about looking at that in the future, and also looking at if we really need monthly meetings of all the committees. Because I don't know, I mean, have you noticed that we're having any problems because of the pared down municipal government, Ellen?
I do think it's gone more quickly. I will even say our last kind of in-person meeting, which was at the end of March, where we basically said, look, we can all read the minutes that are in front of us. So only if you have something to add to that or change that or whatever, then just say, here are the minutes, you've had a chance. Are there any questions? Please, I move that they be accepted. That alone would make us move through our meetings more quickly. And I think that is the way to go forward. I will say I have 100% missed public input. I have missed some of the committee meetings because, for instance, Parks is working on a plan for Lakefront Park. And I think it'd be great if we could all, she's shared it kind of individually with her board, but I think that there are things that would be interesting for all the boards. So yes, I understand what you're saying. I think there is a way to have our minutes delivered at this meeting, at our monthly meeting, in a much more succinct fashion, which I will try and ensure, Richard, going forward we do, I promise you. But I also look forward to the time when the public and all the community members who serve on our boards can be providing input to us as well. Yep, thank you. So next regular trustee meeting will be on.
Oh, Ellen.
Mhm. Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but I have one update. June 1st is quickly approaching. And I wanted to inform you all, you may have known this, but I hadn't heard back from the Otsego Pride Alliance, but Elaine Mosier-Campoli, their president, sent me a note the other day that they voted to donate a pride flag to the village, and it has been purchased. It was a little bit tight timeline wise when they purchased or when they informed me, so I have ordered one just in case it doesn't come on time. But I just wanted to remind everyone that that's coming up, and I am very excited that the Pride Alliance is donating it to the village.
Excellent. Thank you, McGuire, for arranging that. And because as everyone probably knows, at this time, our flag is at half-mast on the flagpole because of people that have been lost in our state to COVID and everything that we are going through. So there will be displayed at 22 Main Street, the Pride flag.
Ellen, I have one more thing that
Mhm.
Mitch brought up to me, which is a PO that we had encumbered last fiscal year for the pavilion footers that have not been done yet, and we cannot encumber over for another year. So we're going to need to transfer the funds from that purchase order to Parks Reserve. So I could have a motion for that.
And can you tell me what was the amount on that?
I don't have the amount in front of me.
But it'll go in the minutes.
But it was an
so,
encumbered purchase order, so that's the only amount that would be transferred into the Parks Reserves.
Okay, so Cindy, do you want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
And Jean seconded it. Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
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 So if that's it, the next regular trustee meeting will be held on June 22nd at 6:30 p.m. And we will be meeting this way going forward. Jean, did you have, I thought you raised your
I
hand.
do have a question.
Mhm.
I'm wondering when Parks Board can meet again.
Well, right now we're still doing virtual, I think, through the month of June. So is my understanding.
Do that?
Pardon me?
Is there any way for Parks Board to do that?
I guess so.
Maybe because it would be next Monday. I don't know if that's too.
Well,
early.
I mean, I think that's a little early because really we usually have a training session with people before we do the actual meeting. So I think if you want to have a meeting in June, I would do it later in the month.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Because it takes Kyle's time to coordinate, especially for the test session. So we'll need to coordinate with his time as well.
Okay.
And don't forget that unfortunately, even though our minutes are our legal document going forward, whenever we have these Zoom meetings, because the public isn't here, we have to do a word for word thing on it. So as Richard said, it's important to keep it succinct and quick so we can get through it. Jim, did you have your hand raised there?
Yeah, I was just wondering if maybe from time to time we could have an outdoor meeting, like in front of the library, an outdoor board meeting, and people could stand on the sidewalk.
And we could shout it to each other through our masks 6 feet apart. I try. I have to say, there are advantages to the Zoom meetings when I think particularly planning board and ZBA have found that when they can share applications and diagrams and things right on the same screen. So everybody's totally on the same page. And I think that was useful tonight, Cindy, with being able to share our resolution for the special event as well. Okay, so again, we will see each other on, if there's nothing else, June 22nd at 6:30 p.m. Thank you all. Stay safe, and I'll look forward to waving to you around the village.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers, all. Have a good night.
Night.